arigato, Mr. Roboto.
Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da. Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da.
Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to another all-new edition of Geek to Me Radio. Today, we are joined by iconic voice actors Bill Ratner and Mary McDonald-Lewis, talking all about their careers voicing Flint and Lady Jaye in the iconic G.I. Joe series from the 80s, the other things they've done with their career, moments they're most proud of, other professionals they've worked with, and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And if you're driving around the greater St. Louis area right now, hearing this on 105.3 FM and 1380 AM, thank you very much for finding us and tuning in. If you're streaming us out there in the world, you're listening to us in another country, another state, thank you very much for finding us and listening. And of course, if you're hearing us after the fact in the podcast form on Google Play, iTunes, SoundCloud, or Podomatic, we appreciate your subscribing and listening there each week as well. This show wouldn't be possible without the support of the City of St. Charles. Check out the website, discoverstcharles.com. Discover St. Charles for a world of things to see and do. If you're hearing us out there in the world, as we mentioned, if you're not in the general area, well, you can come and stay. We've got world-class accommodations, hotels that are just fantastic, all the way down to charming little bed and breakfasts. It just depends on your level of comfort, what it is you're looking for. Something for everyone in St. Charles, a great place to come visit if you're a history buff. We're celebrating our sesquicentennial this weekend. It's their 250th anniversary, so that's a lot of fun. There's always events going on, from Christmas traditions to Legends and Lanterns to Heritage Days, Scottish Festival Parade, all sorts of fun things. And the food, if you're a foodie, there is something for you in St. Charles. Check out the website. Plan your trip now. DiscoverStCharles.com is that website. Come and visit us. We'd love to see you. Without further ado, let's get right to our guests. We're joined now by two iconic voices from my childhood, and I know many people are huge fans. We've got Bill Ratner, who voiced Flint in the G.I. Joe series, and Mary McDonald-Lewis, who voiced Lady Jaye. Thank you both so much for being on air. I'm thrilled to speak with you.
Yo!
Thanks for having us.
Joe!
Thanks so much for having us, James. We're really glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. No, I'm so impressed. I was looking over, obviously, doing my research, and how busy you both have kept with all that you do. Mary, I know, dialect coach, which a lot of voice actors, I don't usually see that on their resume, but you've got an expansive resume and shows that I've loved, from Leverage to Grimm. And we actually had Dean Devlin on the air last year to talk about Bad Samaritan, and you were the dialect coach for that as well.
I was indeed. I got to work with the wonderful David Tennant. I helped him with his American accent. He was a joy to work with. And Dean and I go way back, and he also is just a sweetheart.
So doing dialect, how did you get into it? How does one become a professional dialect coach? If you could just talk a minute or two about that.
Sure. You know, we voice people are natural mimics. We're oriented around sound. And so many of the voice actors that you would have interviewed over time, and Billy is one among them, would be naturally drawn toward making funny sounds with their mouth, like Dee Bradley Baker does, or Frank Welker, or working with accents, as other voice actors do. And I was an accent girl. I was very, very, very drawn to accents, dialects, and languages. And one day, the film commissioner of Oregon called me on the phone. I live in Portland, Oregon, and he said, "You're a dialect coach, aren't you?" And I thought for a moment, and I said, "Why, yes. Yes, I am." And as I like to say, I was really glad that location was some distance between Portland and where they were shooting. because I at least had 40 minutes to figure out what the hell I was going to do. But, following that, I fell in love with helping people sound like where they're supposed to be from in film, television, and stage. And I took it seriously. I joined VASTA, which is our International Speech and Voice and Speech Trainers Association. I took formal training and began my second career as a dialect coach. It gives me great pleasure. It's really fine and fun work.
And Bill, when I first had you both on before we started recording, the two of you just picked up. You immediately broke into High British, and it sounds like the two of you have just remained friends ever since G.I. Joe.
Mary and I met in a voiceover workshop in Hollywood in the mid-'80s and have been friends ever since. And then we happened upon each other at the audition for G.I. Joe, which was about 120 voice actors and a good handful of old TV character actors in the 50s and 60s lining up outside Wally Burr's studio. I said, Mary, what are you doing? And she goes, Yo, Joe. And I went, oh, a special ops soldier. Me too. And we had no idea what we were auditioning for. It was very sort of hush-hush. The agents just said, hey, this is a thing called G.I. Joe. And I said, isn't that like an 11.5-inch like boyfriend of Barbie somehow? And little did we know that it was going to turn into first a miniseries, then a series, then the biggest churner of action figures in the history of the American toy business. And little did we know that we would be cast and get to work together virtually every day for the next 2 years.
Yeah. And you both got to work with so many amazing talents on that show. Like you said, 120 different people. We had Greg Berger on the show last year, who obviously voiced Spirit, Grimlock among the Dinobots. But he also said what a fantastic show that was to work on, and how it was just it's so much different today doing voiceover work than it was back in the 80s, I would assume.
It's different. Well, certainly, one of the reasons it's different, the main reason it's different, is that everybody records separately these days. And you step into a studio. I had about 5 episodes on Archer, and I just stepped into the studio in whatever town I was in at the time, recorded on both coasts and up here in Portland as well. And I needed to understand, as a voice actor, I needed to understand the rhythms of that particular show in order to be believable in dialogue against the other actors. And that's what these brilliant voice actors do. But they're recording in studios, potentially all over the world, whereas we were in the room together. Mm-hmm. And it was really very much like old-time radio in that regard. Wouldn't you say so, Bill?
The other difference is that Wally Burr, who was the director for both the Transformers and the G.I. Joe sessions, kept us for 4.5 hours, whereas the people who worked regularly on all kinds of cartoons, for Hanna-Barbera and Disney and everybody else, were used to these 90-minute sessions where, okay, go. Okay, actor number 1, do your line. Okay, actor number 2. Okay, actor number 1. What Wally Burr wanted and what Hasbro wanted was realistic dialogue, was naturalistic voice acting, which was kind of novel to the American television animation business. It was little kind of crazy purple people or funny, goofy ghosts and this and that, and very, very sort of childlike stuff. But our job was to be adults, special ops soldiers, in relationship with each other, which is a whole different job. And they got good work out of us. And I think that's one of the reasons, that and the quality of the animation and the fact there were so many characters, and the shows were written not so much by cartoon writers as often by episodic TV and movie writers were drafted by Hasbro to write. So the combination of all those things made for some pretty cool animated shows coming out of Sunbow and Hasbro those days.
Yeah.
And it's such an iconic show even to this day. And the toy line, I think, Bill, you mentioned it earlier, they just did a feature on the toys that made us. I'm not sure if either of you have seen this Netflix documentary, but they get into great detail about G.I. Joe has the #1 top-selling toy line, I think, ever. I actually had the giant aircraft carrier. I got it as a special Christmas gift, and it was my favorite toy I ever had.
What they didn't go into in that movie, since it was sort of Star Wars centric, was the fact that G.I. Joe, who had been a very popular post-war figure, especially after the Korean War, as a comic book figure. It was just a character named G.I. Joe. And then Hasbro went and made the doll, the action figure, the 11.5-inch one that dated Barbie. And then near the end of the Vietnam War in the 70s, people stopped buying the G.I. Joe figure. And then in 76 came Lucas's Star Wars, and Lucas was brilliant in his merchandising with 3.5-inch plastic figures rather than 11-inch figures, and lots of characters. And so Hasbro said, we want to do that. And they brought G.I. Joe back as the Joe team, first as just a handful for the miniseries to see if it would fly, and then later up to 85 and 90 characters. And it was really, and there's much more to the story, the most brilliant merchandising campaign in the history of the American toy business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be, I guess, exciting. You're doing these characters, and then all of a sudden you look on the newsstands, hey, look, it's us in a Marvel comic book. Hey, look, it's an action figure of our characters. That had to be, especially at the time, very surreal for both of you, I would think.
And we're going to get their answer to that question as to how surreal is it to be seen as toys right after this. Stand by.
Hey, hi, listeners. This is Greg Berger.
Meet Grimlock, Dinobot leader from Transformers.
And guess what? You're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
Transformers, for the race behind.
We are back. Right before we went to break, we'd asked Mary McDonald-Lewis and Bill Ratner, the voices of Lady Jaye and Flint, respectively, in the G.I. Joe cartoon, how surreal it was to be seeing themselves as toys.
Well, there was it was always strange to see yourself in some form or other on a billboard or on a TV ad or, yes, on the pages of a comic book. But what was more surreal for me is this show's lasting power. And the fact that we can still see ourselves and see our characters held in such a beloved place. And, Billy and you have both explained, at least partially, reasons why that is so. But what fascinates me about G.I. Joe is the mystery, the power underlying the stories, the characters, the look and feel of it. And that, I think, gave it its lasting power. These are stories that stuck. It's just occurred to me, all of us remember the fairy tales that our parents told us, or maybe the books that we read when we were kids. I think this was a kind of, for the latchkey generation, a kind of bedtime story in the middle of the afternoon.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but you're quite right. Yeah, that would be something we'd watch after school, and I've shown it to my niece now, who's kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool, and she's into it, and she's I guess 12, so it's a very neat thing, and it's kind of ubiquitous in that fact is that it's not necessarily relegated to the 80s like some cartoons were. It's universal
and should be.
Right. In some cases, yes.
Some cartoons just don't age well, and that's I'm talking about from sort of Steamboat Willie forward. Some are perennial, and we hear them, we see them, we care about them. Steamboat Willie among them, by the way. But we got lucky with G.I. Joe, and Billy and I are now meeting just a legion of new fans, probably a generation and a half of new fans, at least one generation of new fans. And we go to cons together fairly often, and we hope to spend more time talking to the fans as a team moving forward, because we have a lot to talk about. There's a lot we want to share. And more importantly than that, we love providing happy memories to the folks who come to these cons.
Yeah, and I'm following you both on Twitter, so please make sure that you guys tweet out if you guys have an upcoming con, because a lot of times I'll go to these conventions and I'll broadcast my show live at the event. And for those of you who are listening right now, if you want to follow both of them on Twitter, it's at Bill Ratner and at M. McDonald-Lewis. Their respective websites are BillRatner.com and MaryMac.com, so you can keep up with all of them. But yes, please let us know for future reference. I'd love to actually meet you guys, have you signed. I've got tons of stuff I'd have you sign. It'd be brilliant.
Absolutely.
And talking about the voice work, Bill, you've reprised the role of Flint several times since G.I. Joe Family Guy. You've worked with Seth MacFarlane, having you on Robot Chicken with Seth Green, Community. That's got to be a blast, I would think, revisiting the character with all these shows that are doing gangbusters right now.
So I got one of the weirdest phone calls I've ever gotten in my life from my agent, and this is probably 8 years ago. Apparently, somebody from Family Guy, an assistant producer, called and said, we're calling on behalf of Seth MacFarlane, wondering if the guy who did the voice of Flint in G.I. Joe is still alive. And she said, yeah, why would that be? Well, Mr. MacFarlane was a big fan, and he wants to do an episode and wants to know if we could work with the guy who did the voice of Flint. And I said, of course, sure. And his office was out at 20th Century Fox, which is quite a ways away from me. And for scheduling reasons, because of other gigs in his schedule, we couldn't get it together. So we decided to do a session on the phone where they would record me at 20th Century Fox via ISDN, and I'd be in my own studio. And so Seth MacFarlane gets on the phone, and this is a celebrity, right? And he's all nervous. And I said, so listen, man, how old were you when you watched G.I. Joe? I was 12, and I got to tell you, I used to come home after school and blah, blah, blah. And I'd, go into my mom's wallet, and I'd steal money, and I'd buy the VHSs. And he was a huge Joe fan. And so we did this crazy one-time episode that was really fun. And then his friend and colleague, Seth Green, who did Robot Chicken, said, oh, I was a huge Joe fan. And so I think I did a couple episodes of Robot Chicken, so it was really fun. And it taught me something. I had no idea how long-lasting the impressions of G.I. Joe were in fans' ears. And then the people from NBC at Community who created that show were big fans, and we all did an episode of that. And the first way that I really understood what fandom was about for voice acting was I was down in Southern California, staying at Hotel del Coronado, which is this incredible historic place built in the end of the 19th century. They shot the movie Stuntman with Peter O'Toole there. Mm-hmm. And it's a wonderful, wacky, old place. And I was waiting for a girlfriend to come out, to check out. And I was in the gift shop, and they were renting the audio tour guide of, the Hotel del Coronado. And so I put out my $5 and put the headphones on, walked out toward the beach on the sand, literally. And here comes the voice of the great Hans Conried. Hans Conried, when I was a kid, was the voice was Captain Hook in Peter Pan. He was the narrator of The Grinch.
Oh yeah, sure.
He was Snidely Whiplash. He was in the Rocky and Bullwinkle show. He was Wally the Walrus on the Woody Woodpecker show, and he was doing this sort of straight narration of the blah blah blah. I started crying. I mean, here I am, an adult standing on the beach looking at the Pacific Ocean, sobbing, hearing this man's voice that I hadn't heard since I was 12 years old. And when Mary and I, talk to fans about how much all this means and so on, mm-hmm. I get it only because of that afternoon, accidentally listening to a voice that was a part of my subconscious, who's wormed his way through all this brilliance and characters as a voice actor into my heart.
That's a great story. That's amazing.
I think that like, how they say that smell is the least affected of memories. People always, can get pushed back to their first grade classroom on the first day of school, or the smell of blossoms reminds them of their own street in spring. And it's really, really clear. It's really clear memory. I think sight must be the most deceiving, but I believe that sound is perhaps second only to smell. I think that the purity of sound can sweep you away. And so, as with Billy and Hans, we remain deep inside ourselves touched by sound, specific sounds, and what it means to us.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, like I said, I'm listening to both of you now. It's hard not to picture your characters from G.I. Joe, even though I know what you look like in real life. That 10-year-old boy inside of me still is picturing Flint and Lady Jaye talking to you right now. It's
Billy's much hunkier than Flint is. Billy's much more of a babe. Totally
ripped, scary ripped.
It's got doing pull-ups for all these years. It's got to take its toll.
Yeah.
Well, he works at it.
That's great. And I know with Mary, you've worked on Batman the Animated Series and Voltron, so I guess that's twice you actually got to work with the amazing Andrea Romano, who's also been on the show a few times, and I've never heard anybody not gush about working with Andrea.
We're going to come right back with the answer to that question after this. Please stand by.
Hi, this is Andrea Romano. I happen to be the voice director for many animated series, including the Justice League. You are listening on Geek to Me Radio.
And we're back. This segment brought to you by Marcus Theaters. If you have not yet seen Avengers Endgame, I don't know what you're waiting for. I'm sure it's been spoiled for you by now. Hopefully not. If you're social media savvy, you need to stay away, but get out and see it. An amazing film, and maybe you want to help push it over the top and have it beat Avatar for the #1 movie of all times. Your chance to get out and see it, do it at a Marcus Theater. If you're going to see it, it's a 3-hour movie. You want to be comfortable. You want to have some great food in front of you. You want to really do it right. You want to see it at a Marcus Theater. Maybe you've already seen Avengers once, twice, maybe 3 times like I have. Lots of other movies to be seen. We've got a lot of great movies out there. Detective Pikachu currently in theaters for all my Pokemon Go friends. Whatever you do, go see a movie at a Marcus Theater. MarcusTheaters.com is the website. Check out movie reviews. See what's playing. 11 different states in which you can find a Marcus Theater for the best movie-going experience. That's MarcusTheaters.com. Before we went to break, we were talking with Mary McDonald-Lewis and Bill Ratner. And we'd asked Mary what it was like working with Andrea Romano.
Oh, when I did that Voltron episode, it was Andrea's last day before retirement. And she let me know when the session was done, and I literally said to her and everybody else who was on the line, I said, oh, well, then I need to take a moment and express to you how we in the business feel about you, Andrea. And, yeah, you're right. I gushed. We all came up together. We were youngsters 30, 35 years ago. And so we got to watch each other grow. And the notion that we still get to play in this business is astonishing good luck and great fortune. And I think one of the things that fans enjoy about those of us who come out to the cons is that when we're together and we're in panel discussions or we've got tables next to each other, the camaraderie and the love that they see us engaging in is 100% genuine. We adore each other.
Yeah, I truly think I've had plenty of voiceover people on the show. I truly think they're just the most genuine, authentic, just warm people I've ever had the privilege to speak with. And I've never had a bad experience talking to a voiceover. It's just, I don't know what it is. Not that I've had bad experiences with real life, movie stars or anything like that, but it's just, there's a different energy. There's, like I said, there's that warmth and authenticity with voiceover actors especially that I just pick up on and I notice.
Well, there are two things. Picture, if you will, every weirdo that you ever met in class from kindergarten on who sat in the back of the room making strange body noises and the teacher going, "Who's doing that? Who's doing that?" And get that person together with all like-minded persons around the world. And a reunion, and you have voiceover people, and secondly, there's a difference. There's a humbling thing because we're not judged for what we look like. We're not judged for the hair, the face, the shape of the nose. None of it. It's a very different thing, and voice casting can be more subjective. And so, face actors, as we call them, or meat puppets, as we sometimes call them. it's a stranger job, and they're, there's TV, especially ones who get caught in television. And I've had friends who've been cast in great roles on episodic television who've said, if I could get out of this contract, I would. And I said, why? Because it's the same thing every single day. They're just asked to sort of, pose. And certainly there's decent acting on television, especially these days. But voice acting is a whole different thing, where you're not being judged for how you look or what you wear, what your hair looks like. You're just being judged on the art that comes out of your mouth. And it's a different thing. Is it harder? No. Is it different? Yeah, way different. And I would say that if you were to take a whole bunch of on-camera actors and a whole bunch of voice actors and interview them and go away, you'd say, yeah, they're different. And then you could generalize as to how. But we don't have to worry so much.
Right. And
they're just, we get hired because the ones who hire us can't do what we do.
Exactly. Thank God. And to that, I would add that not only do we not have to worry, that's the entire point. We don't want to worry. I moved down to Los Angeles as a lovely 27-year-old, 26-year-old. In fact, I met Billy when I was about that age. And I think Billy was about 40, 45. He's yonks older than I am, right, Billy?
Yeah.
But at that point, I certainly could have moved into on camera and could have sort of attempted to joust at that dragon. It was no harder or easier than getting into the game as a voice actor, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted people. My dream was to be able to step into a 7-Eleven and buy a pack of Wrigley's gum and walk away and have the clerk say after I've gone, where have I heard that voice before?
Ah, yes.
And the other testament to that, I think, is the great Mark Hamill, who, as you know, is much more interested in being a voice actor than a face actor. And, he's a con guy. He's a comic book guy. And even though he's had this, Mount Everest-sized fame, he still vibes like a voice guy.
Yeah. And I think now, Bill, you're working on Nightfall. That's the movie the TV series with Mark Hamill, correct?
We're going to find out if that was indeed Bill in Nightfall right after this. Stand by.
Sword of Omens, come to my hand. I, Lion-O, command it. Hi, this is Larry Kennedy, the voice of Lion-O, and you're listening to Geek to Me Radio.
And we're back. Still chatting with Mary McDonald-Lewis, Lady Jaye and G.I. Joe, and Bill Ratner, the voice of Flint, talking about some of their on-camera stuff, and we wanted to find out, was that Bill Ratner in Nightfall with Mark Hamill?
And I think, now, Bill, you're working on Nightfall. That's the movie, the TV series with Mark Hamill, correct?
No, that's not me. That's my cousin, Gil Ratner. No.
Oh.
The only thing I'm very proud to say that I am working on is The Dead Don't Die, the new Jim Jarmusch picture that is actually opening the Cannes Film Festival. That looks hysterical, starring Bill Murray and Adam Driver. It's my first vampire movie. Now, I don't know if I'll actually get any more work on it, but I did a TV spot for it and was very, very proud. And what I do a lot of is narrations of cable stuff. In the Dead of Night, which is it's a non-fiction show about bad things that happen after the sun goes down. And air disasters for the Smithsonian Channel. And whenever there are dark things in the universe, from tornadoes to air crashes, they call Flint.
It's so true. And it's funny, the things that excite us. I remember I was voice of the station up here for KPTV, Oregon's 12. And so that means you do the kind of, it's all coming up on the 10 o'clock news kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Or today on Baywatch, that kind of stuff. And I came in one day and they said, "Hey, Mary Mac, we have a little something extra for you to do today. Do you mind?" I said, "No, I'm happy to. What is it?" And they said, it's the station sign off, and I'm like, oh my God, oh, I could die happy now, because it's one of those, from the mountains to the sea, from all of us at KPTV, good night. And it's just like, oh my God, this is old school voice acting. Silly little things, but yeah, super proud of it and super, super honored. We are the biggest dorks you'll ever meet, for sure.
The other nice thing about it for both men and women, I mean, it's kind of a given that on camera people in Hollywood, I don't know if this is true on Broadway, but in film and television, for a woman at 38, it's near the end. For a man at 44, it's near the end. My hero is Don Pardo on Saturday Night Live, starring Bill Murray. He died at age 92 with a home studio in Phoenix, working for NBC for Saturday Night Live. June Foray, the voice of a million characters, was working into her late 80s, and still sounded. I worked with her once in the 80s, and she was already 70-something years old. And you're working with June Foray. Oh, and this lady comes in with a matching cranberry skirt and purse and shoes and skirt, hat and everything. And there's this nice old lady I'm going to work with. And this voice comes out of her of like a 20-year-old. And it was the spookiest thing I've ever experienced. So you have these people with all this incredible experience of acting and a million characters accrued in their brains. They don't have to stop in voice work.
Neither Dawn nor June had to work. They did it because they loved it,
Yeah, I mean, it would be a great gig. I would. That's one of those things. I think anyone who goes into radio is kind of like, well, we can't do voiceover, so we'll do radio. That's kind of what I'm doing. But it's always the fun. Because it is acting. And I think it was Kevin Conroy said that you still have to learn to act before you can voice act. There's still that aspect of it because it is acting. It's just more intense stuff that you're doing. You can't use your body and face as much. It's all with the voice. So it's I think one of you just said, in an aspect, it is a little harder, actually.
It's funny. The issue of going from radio to voiceovers is a very logical leap. But you got a great voice for voiceover, James. And I was a radio guy. I was a FM easy listening guy. And I had to work pretty hard to get rid of the FM easy listening voice and find out the real guy. And that's the trick. There are a lot of people interested in voiceovers these days. And that's the trick, is to get out of the sort of the default read that one has. And radio people end up doing this read because it works for us. And then suddenly you're in front of an advertising agency person or a network broadcaster, and they go, "You sound a little FM." Oh no. That's the death knell. That's like, instead of saying, "We hate you, we're never hiring you again," they say, "You sound a little FM, Bill." So I had to work hard to get out of that.
The only thing that sells today, and Billy, tell me what you think about this. The only thing that sells today, in my opinion, is truth. That's not to say that there aren't a bunch of, stupid commercials out there that are voiced poorly, typically by non-union actors. It's not to say that there isn't a bunch of, yell and sell, dollar a holler kind of spots out there. Those spots will always be out there. But if you're talking about the kind of voice work, the kind of performance that can move product in a tremendously crowded marketplace in the era of Amazon, you've got to come to that mic with what I call your home voice, your heart voice, and you have to find a way to tell the truth about what it is you're talking about. And, one of the things that I really admire about Billy is he gets behind the mic and he's able to do these promos, which are quite big and can be very, very traditional, very proscribed in terms of what we think of in a traditional promo. But he manages to strike a balance, that he's a voice you believe because he's brought his truth to the microphone while still imparting sort of the urgency of, going to see Deader Than Dead, the new vampire film.
Yeah, no, Ant-Man, Talladega Nights, Kung Fu Panda, Inside Out. You've actually got a lot of movie trailer that you've done voices for. That's the movies are fantastic. So I guess it's kind of easy to get excited when you're promoting that type of movie.
Well, for Talladega Nights, which was my first big campaign, I was on the phone with the producer auditioning. And as the minutes went by, it was clear to me that he was disappointed in my read, because I thought, hey, it's a Will Ferrell comedy and it's got to sound funny. And finally, this guy, who was also a writer, was quite brilliant. He said to me in his last gasp of hope that I might be able to produce something. He said, "Listen, all right, let's pretend this is not a comedy. This is the most serious motion picture ever made in the history of Hollywood. It's called Talladega Nights, starring Will Ferrell." And I went, "Oh, okay, Talladega Nights." And he goes, "Yeah, there you go. That's it." So I wasn't intelligent enough to figure out how to do it properly. I just kept kind of grinding away. It's a comedy. It's got to be kind of fun. And there's an odd sort of magic to what the voice actor has to do. And Mary, I was watching network TV, and suddenly a huge national commercial. There used to be more and more of those, but with the advent of cable, there aren't so many. But this big national commercial comes on for, is it Selecta? What's it called? Selexa. And so I love that. They have there's an ad agency in San Francisco that does nothing but name big pharma drugs. And Celexa is an anti-anxiety medication. Is that right?
Yeah, but this was Lunesta. The brand was Lunesta. Yeah.
Yeah. It's Sinesta. And I screamed to my wife, "Honey, that's Mary McDonald-Lewis. That's Lady Jaye selling us Sinesta." And I listened and I played it. We had taped some show, and I kept playing it over and over. She said, "Stop, we've heard it." And no, listen to what she does. And she's going, "Oh," and it was like, because I know Mary, and she's not that person. It's not that she's not concerned for people's mental health, but this woman was really concerned about nothing but your mental health, which will be made better by Sinesta.
So did it make you go out and get a prescription for it, Bill? Did it like drive you, like you have no problems, but you still wanted to go get this medicine just because it was the voice?
Right. I don't suffer from depression or anxiety, but I wanted a script immediately.
He just called me up and had me talk to him on the phone. That's all.
Yeah,
I read him bedtime stories.
Yeah.
So, of the career you both have had, it's an impressive career. Both just all the I know, Bill, you're a storyteller. You teach. Mary, you do this dialect coaching. You're both very active in the business still. We'll start with Mary. What is the project or job you've done that you're most proud of as of now?
We're going to come back with the answer to that question right after this. Stand by. Silver heart, a rainbow in the night.
Hey, you guys, this is Raphael of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and after we've kicked Shredder's butt, we all get down in the sewer and we listen to Geek to Me Radio. Turtle Power!
We're wrapping things up here on Geek to Me Radio. A fantastic show. Right before we went to break, we'd asked Mary McDonald-Lewis, the voice of Lady Jaye, and Bill Ratner Flint what they're most excited about, or most proud of, I should say, in their career.
Well, I'm going to give that a two-part answer. At the top of my list at any point is industrial work that I do that is in service to social justice movements. And that can be a woman's right to choose. That can be the humane treatment of animals. That can be certainly promoting political parties and propositions and political candidates whom I support, who all lean toward helping those less fortunate, helping migrants, helping women, protecting the planet, ecologically speaking. So when I lend my voice to the forces of good, it makes me proud. And what I like about that is, of course, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. And then the second thing, which I'll let Billy talk about a little bit if he wants to, is that we're cooking up something that we think is going to be pretty cool. And that's going to be, I'm sure, the next project that I'm very, very proud of. So, Billy, I'll turn it over to you.
A couple things. One is performing in Jonesboro, Tennessee at the International Storytelling Festival. And it was an invitation, and it was really the highlight. It was a huge revival tent of about 1,200 people, and it was a beautiful October afternoon. And that was sort of the culmination of everything I learned in theater and from the great Wally Burr and on and on. And the other thing is I published a book with Familius Publications called "Parenting for the Digital Age: The Truth About Media's Effect on Children." And I was able to do a whole chapter about G.I. Joe and a chapter about Barbie, and just kind of a look into the back door of how it is and why it is that programming is sold in the way it is online and in every other way to kids these days. And then I have to say it was G.I. Joe. I'd done a couple of cartoons. I'd done one-offs. I'd done a Superman as a character and so on, the work at Hanna-Barbera and so on, but I'd never done a series. I'd never developed a character like that. I'd never had a decent director like Wally Burr. I'd never had wonderful actors, like Mary and everybody else, and wonderful old character actors from television who I hadn't seen since the 50s show up in those studios. And we built an ensemble of cartoon voice actors and a legacy that was G.I. Joe that got me really where I am. And I'm very grateful.
Bill Ratner, at Bill Ratner on Twitter. BillRatner.com is the website. Mary McDonald-Lewis, MaryMac.com is her website. At M. McDonald-Lewis on Twitter. I really, honestly cannot thank you both enough. This has been an incredible joy to speak with you both and just to talk about what you've got going on and to kind of reminisce with you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for both of you being on air with me today.
You bet, James. This has been great.
Thank you.
To Me
we
Radio.
really appreciate it.
Anytime. Well, and like I said, if you're ever promoting another project, or please let me know if you're doing a con. I'd love to have you on again, and maybe we can meet in person.
Send us a link. Send us a link to this episode, and we'll tweet it out to the world.
Perfect. I will do just that.
That's going to do it for us. Another fantastic show. My thanks once again to Bill Ratner and Mary McDonald-Lewis. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Just find Geek to Me Radio. Until next week, my friends.
It's not in the way you watch iZombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young Art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, USS Flag. Good night.